It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. Welcome to Elmo's World Podcast. I am Elmo and I have my awesome friend here, Ty Wilson. Hey man, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, my name is Ty Wilson. I am just a normal everyday dude. I don't really have any credentials. I was a former Christian of about 17 years, now deconstructed out of the Christian faith. Best descriptions of me would be something along the lines of agnostic, atheist. Although, as far as from that perspective, more recently, I've been a lot more involved in politics. I describe myself as a leftist, as an ANCOM. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. By the way, you said ANCOM, like you mean anarchist, communist?
You got it.
Okay. We're gonna dive.
Didn't know what
into
you were
that.
getting yourself into, huh?
All right. Awesome. Okay. So, question, my friend. Can you sort of be more specific into the details? You said you were a former Christian. What happened there, and like what specifically about the Christian religion, or just mainly religion, got you out of it? And then,
sure.
In terms of, so now that you're an atheist, can you establish the foundations of your your existentialism, I guess, and on the ethical framework that you abide in? Because I think that those are essential before we actually dive into your politics. So
Sure.
Tell a story about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in the Midwest, in Missouri, to be specific. So I grew up in the zeitgeist of the early 90s evangelicalism. And for me, what that looked like was a wide variety of Christian denominations. And you stop me if I talk too much, because I could talk about this literally all day. I was initially a part of a Pentecostal church. I was actually confirmed in a Methodist church. Then my family moved slowly into Reformed theology. I came to have a very Calvinist understanding of theology. And then from there, it's hard to give you exactly how I left the faith. It was a series of events over a long period of time, really. But there were just holes. And I just came to find that I just didn't really have good reasons to believe the things that I did. And so, that's my story, kind of in a nutshell of my background.
Awesome. Okay. So, one question. You have been in a lot of, denominations of the Christian faith, right? So very familiar with a lot of versions of the gospel, of Christianity, and how just church works, right? So what do you think about the being born into that? Like, do you feel like it's wrong to have been raised in a family where, you know, you sort of were enforced to attend all of everything and not really given an initial choice if you actually want to believe or not?
Sure. No, I mean, that's a great question. I'll tell you from my personal aspect, that's never how I felt. I didn't feel that I was forced into that. I loved going to church. I mean, it was a huge part of my life and my memories of my childhood. It never felt forced, you know, by my parents. Now I can take that, my kind of personal anecdote out of that. And I can say that there's a good possibility that that sort of indoctrination from a high level is not a positive thing, right? It's not a good thing to kind of put your children into those situations where, I mean, we're talking about, you know, huge life and death theological truths, right? And children can't comprehend that sort of thing. So I can see both sides of that coin. For me, it was never something that I was like, oh my God, you know, I hate going to church. I loved it. And here's the other thing too. It's very important, I think, to put this in the context of, you know, for me personally, anyways, of what my parents thought they were doing. I mean, my parents were just as much a victim of the religion that I was, right? They believed that they were doing the right thing. So, you know, in no way do I fault them for that or think that there was any sort of abuse to that. However, like I said, I can pull myself out of that situation and see from a high level where indoctrination in and of itself has, you know, real negatives. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in this case, right, you were all right with it because you weren't really, you know, you did not fully grasp the gravity of the negative effects of, if, you know, for some people, and maybe actually for a lot of people, when it comes to like religious indoctrination, right? Like there are a lot of people who are actually born into really bad cults, right? And but of course your situation was a lot better, and but it was not that, I guess, like it was all right with you to have been raised in that, because of course you probably loved your family, and their intentions for you to have the faith, to share their faith with them, was really good as well,
You
right?
know, I think
And
it's also important to put it in the context
mhm,
of, you know, there was nothing there were, I shouldn't say nothing. There were very few religiously negative experiences that I had in the church. You know, and
mhm,
that's not everybody can say that. Um, you know, I was very lucky in that I had um, a church family, several church families over the
mhm,
years that were always positive, and that's
mhm,
definitely not the story for everybody. But for me, you
mhm,
know, it was that case that nothing really negative happened to me in the church or with religion in general, until I decided to start questioning and potentially leave it. And then it became a lot more hostile, not in an abusive way. It was just, you know, people didn't want to hang out with you when you didn't believe. So
then you know, you're not the typical, you know, I guess atheist narrative, or like, oh, was raised in this church and I was indoctrinated and
yeah.
I hated it and everything. Okay, all right, but so you started questioning your, you know, the religion that you had.
Right.
What was your thought process, and where did you start, and what triggered it actually, you know, like why
Yeah.
did you start questioning it?
Sure. So, you know, I think I can trace it back to my discovery of linguistics. Oddly enough, I'm a huge J.R.R. Tolkien fan, right? And I knew from reading him and about him that he was really big into linguistics. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna get on this shit. So I started studying linguistics, and I had a very fundamentalist teaching, very fundamentalist upbringing. I was homeschooled. There's another factor there for you. I didn't mention that. And so I believed in a literal Tower of Babel. And so I got to studying linguistics, and I was like, well, hold on. This doesn't match up with
Yeah.
the Tower of Babel at all. And so, you know, that was a crack initially there. Like, wait a second, this doesn't really match up. And then, you know, I was a huge PBS nerd as a kid, and my parents were very much against evolution. I always kind of knew, you know, evolution's probably true. And it didn't really impact my faith. I just figured, you know, God could figure that out. It didn't really matter. And so that's what I initially did with the linguistics thing too. Like, you know what? It's like evolution. I'll get to figuring that out later. It doesn't really impact the truth of the Bible. And so I remember reading, asking some questions about that around that time. And my parents giving me this book by Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. You may be familiar. And in that, he makes a couple of statements there where he's looking at the world and he says, well, obviously, this had a creator. And I was like, well, hold on. That sort of thing is only obvious if you approach it with the preconception that there was a creator. How is this obvious unless you already believe it? And so that was another sort of break there that I was like, what it made me question my preconceptions. What am I preconceiving here? What am I coming to the table with already that maybe I don't have a good reason to? And and so I think beyond that, there was I can give you another specific. I was taught, I was born in the Midwest, white middle class family, right? I was taught American exceptionalism, first and foremost, greatest country in the goddamn world. And I came to realize as I learned more and more history, Howard Zinn's History of the U.S., and then Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, highly recommend that book, made me realize more and more that my preconception, my conception of the world and my place in it was not correct, which made me question more and more things, right? So I came to realize that, America has done a lot of really bad things. And so I had this preconceived notion that America is the best. Now I come to realize, boy, that's not really true. What else is out there that I'm, maybe taking for granted? So, yeah, I think it's tough to give you exact moments, but there's some anyways.
Yeah. And so I guess what I can call it is you started to have this critical thinking, right? Where you were able to escape that Dunning-Kruger effect that a lot of religious people who raise in these families. I would say that, for example, I myself, I literally believed in everything in the Bible, like literally. Of course, right now I'm not a literalist, but
right.
So in that sense, just because I was told of it, and I believed it, but that shouldn't that's not how it's supposed to work. Like you actually assess everything and use your critical thinking skills to be able to determine if it is the truth. So would you say that you started to question these things because you have this sort of skepticism? So in terms of the skepticism, do you think it was good for you, or it was like a bad? Because for some, like just being skeptical is sometimes compared to like negative cynicism, where you just don't want to believe anything or something like that.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, what you're asking. So there was a critical moment where I had to decide, because I knew that I could stay where I was, where I believed, in the church family that I was in, or I could really investigate things and figure it out. I had to decide what was more important to me, the faith in and of itself, the community, or finding out what was actually real. And so there was a very critical moment. And I remember making this decision, you know what, even if the truth hurts, even if it means me leaving Christianity, leaving behind the people that I know and I care about, not really behind, but you know what I mean? It's just not the same. Even if it means, hurting those social relationships, I need to figure out what the truth is. So yes, it was negative in some ways. It was, there were negative consequences, but I didn't let those consequences affect what my goal was. If that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I would say, it is a means to an end, right? And so for you, Ty, being that person who had to accept the consequences of your, of thinking for yourself, and being able to say out loud and publicly that you deny a lot of things that a lot of people that don't matter to you love. That's
Right.
really, really huge thing. A lot of
It
a lot
wasn't
of
as big as you think. It
Mhm.
wasn't because I was afraid, really afraid, especially with my family. I mean,
Mhm.
friends are one thing, but family was the biggest thing. It
Okay.
wasn't as bad as I thought. I thought it was going to be a lot worse.
Mhm.
And then I'll tell you, I also had the benefit of years. I mean, it's been about 5 years now since,
Mhm.
no, it's longer than that. 6 years. What is
Mhm.
2021? About 6 years. Since I've been out, I guess. And
Mhm.
so my fear of that reaction was a lot worse than what the actual reaction was. And which is fantastic. I mean, and me
Awesome.
and my family, we can talk about it. And the best thing that I have, the best advice that I have for anybody that's an atheist and closeted, not really out, is to
Mhm.
just live your life the best that you can and
Mhm.
let your actions speak, because really what people are afraid of is, are you a different person? Are you bad now? Well, what are you going to do now?
And I want to go back to the your thought process on, no, let's, and what about the book, right? Who on this is obviously created by God, that statement by the author.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so in terms of preconceptions, why do you say that it is actually not obvious?
Sure. Because what I found in this book and in other apologetic texts was that this is not for the person that wants to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
These books are for people that want to feel comfortable. And that
Mm-hmm.
statement, we can observe this and see that this is obvious. That statement is a statement for comfort. It's a statement to make people feel better about a position that they're already holding. It's a preconception statement. And
Yeah.
that's fine. I mean, if that's where people want to be, right? That's the decision that they have to make. If they want to really pursue and figure things out, or if they just want to feel comfortable. I mean,
You mean it's like
that's where that's at.
it feeds the confirmation bias.
Well, to an extent, and then, you know, I think the reason that was impactful to me was because, if you're coming at that with any sort of skepticism, right? It's kind of obvious that the statement that this is obvious is just, kind of falls flat. And so now that doesn't mean in and of itself that, what he's saying is wrong, right? It doesn't mean that he's wrong. It just means that his reasons there were not very good. And so that's where the skepticism really started to break wide open, because it was like, well, why would somebody use bad reasoning, if there are really good reasons out there? Why? And what I seem to find as more and more time went by is that, well, it's just because there's not that many good reasons, if
Mm-hmm.
any. And I'm kind of the Tom Jump flair, where by atheist, I mean, I don't think there are good reasons. There's not good evidence to believe in a God.
So I want to see your thought process on, let's say,
Mhm.
if you make a counter argument, let's say the good, at least the good valid theistic arguments for God, let's say the Kalam cosmological argument.
Kalam is fine. I like Kalam. Doesn't
Mhm.
indicate a God. Kalam is fine. I'm fine with there being a cause for the universe. I think there probably is a cause for the universe. Makes sense to me.
Interesting. So you do agree with the Kalam
Sure,
in terms
sure.
to defining what this uncaused cause is. That's where you
Right.
find it problematic.
Yeah, I think that's problematic to just assume that that's a God. I think that a lot of people that use the Kalam kind of make that assumption and just kind of skip along the way. But I think it's also a little hubristic to say, look, things start, you got to have something to start them, and we can know all about that person that started it, because you've slipped in the personhood there that I don't agree that you can do that. I don't know that you can say that's necessarily an entity or a person. And you slipped in that we can know something about them. Well, the only way, and here's maybe showing my Calvinist roots a little bit. The only way is to presuppose that, and presuppose that there's a God. And if you want to do the precept route, then more power to you. Don't let me ramble on. I'm sorry if I ramble sometimes.
Well, it seems to me that the kalam is not really a presuppositionalist argument. It's more of
No. I'm sorry. No, you're right. The kalam is not. But I'm fine with the kalam. I just don't think that it indicates a day. I mean, it doesn't. At the end, it just says that there's a cause. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the case.
So let's continue this about the kalam. Like for example, what the people who use the contingency argument, right, would say is like if we were to derive conclusions from this uncaused cause, right, then it has to be this perfect being that is independent, of any external force for its existence. So you would go to like Thomistic conclusions as well of God being the perfect being itself, and then so do you follow that route, and that's where it leads you to this classical definition of God, right? But so have you looked into a lot of that stuff as well?
Yeah. And so here's my thought about that sort of definitional approach to a deity. I don't think we can define things into being, and I feel like that's a lot of what those arguments try to do.
Yeah,
but that's where I'm like, that seems a little bit like you're really, really wanting to use words to sort of smuggle in these concepts of something that's close to a god. But here's the thing. I'm like, at the end of the day, those concepts, that's not the God that these people believe in, right? I mean, never when I was a Christian would I have recognized that as the God that I believed in. The God that I believed in lived and breathed and did things in our lives and loved us. It wasn't just this sort of vague deity notion of a prime mover that gives us all being, it sustains all things, no. So it does make me a little upset, and not at you, but when I hear these sorts of arguments, because that's not the God that these people believe in. So, and so I guess to wrap that up is, I don't think we can really define a deity into being. That's what I feel like those arguments are trying to do. They're a little bit of wordplay to do that. And I don't think that's the God that these people really believe in.
Okay, in terms of let's say like a philosophically defined God, right? Like you would say, their arguments are sort of valid, they sort of make sense, right?
No, I would not say that.
Oh,
I would not say that. I would say that those arguments are self-referential, and all they're doing is using wordplay to sort of define a God into being. And they rest on some assertions that can't be justified. So, the assertion that we have to have some sort of perfect being to be human, or some sort of referential.
So they sort of define God into existence, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah. It's wordplay, and that's cool, and it's a fun mental exercise. But that's I don't see that relating to reality. I don't see that gap between those arguments and reality. And so I want to be very clear. It's not that I accept those arguments. It's that I can see that their structures and what they're doing there. But no, I don't. I wouldn't think those are good arguments to make, or convincing at all. So I don't know of anybody that's convinced by those arguments either.
So, but an additional point that you made there was that they don't really believe that God, anyways. Well,
right.
Well, when it comes to let's say like Catholic Jesuit priest, right, who follows the Tom reads Thomas Aquinas and everything, I would actually say that they do believe how God is defined philosophically, but of course when you add religion to it, then it comes, or like the Bible and theology, that's where it sort of gets complicated, and that's where we say like, well, they don't really believe in that God like
Well,
just a philosophical God.
Yeah, what I mean by that is, there is a vast gulf between that thing that they're arguing for and the thing that they're actually believing in and operating with, right? They have this idea of a God that does and is X, and they're over here arguing for Y. And here's, to me, as an outsider now, and even as a Christian, when I saw those sorts of arguments, I was like, well, why are you arguing for something that's different? I don't think that does anybody any services. I think that the people who are a little bit more bold in saying, yeah, this is the God that I actually believe in, I think they are a little bit more honest in their presentation. So it does feel dishonest sometimes to kind of argue for something that you're not really believing in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, okay. So, but you were raised in, let's say, like very familiar with theology, right? And because of Sunday school and everything. So, let's use the Calvinist view of God, where God is in full control of everything, like full providence, perfect providence. And so even but of course we do have our human will, but everything that happens is all ultimately because of God's omnipotent power and
sovereignty.
Providence. So if you use that, and then they have this philosophical God as like the skeleton. They seem to still work together, and their understanding of the nature of God, so it still sort of makes sense, right? Like an unmoved mover being able to be this prime being that knows everything. It doesn't contradict, right?
Well, here's let me give you a little bit of an analogy. Maybe if I am trying to sell you a car, and all I focus on is the stereo, and I'm saying, this thing has speakers, and it's loud, and it's great. The speakers are loud and great, and the surround sound is awesome. But then I don't tell you about the rest of the car, and then the rest of the car is crap. Doesn't that would come across as a little bit dishonest? It's a sort of, we're going to only explain one portion of this and focus on that because it looks good and it's easy, but tell me about the rest of the car. That's my point. What I'm saying?
I see. Well, I get your point, but it seems to me that their approach here is that I'm going to talk about the stereo, right? Because this is the real answer is, does the stereo exist? And then
sure.
So if we can prove that the stereo exists with the Kalam cosmological argument and a lot of other arguments, right, we can slowly also prove that the other parts of this car exist, and then and they seem to work together. And I think that's what a lot of theists do, right? They start with
and in my analogy, I'm fine with admitting that the car and the stereo exist, right? In my analogy, I'm saying, let's presume that this God exists, right? So from the standpoint of trying to prove the car exists, the analogy breaks down. I'm just trying to show how that comes across as dishonest, as if if it was a car, there was something we did know exist, having talking about that. Because beyond, here's an important part, Elmo, beyond just proving to me that this God exists, you need to sell that to me, right? I mean, not you personally, but what I'm saying, that concept of that God has to be sold to me, because here's the thing, and I'll say this. If that God exists, if the God of the Bible exists, why would I worship that God?
Interesting.
I mean, I don't want to die and go to hell, right? I don't want to, I mean, that's one view. You might be a, what is it when you disappear forever instead of go to hell?
Nirvana?
No. There's a certain soteriological term for it. I can't remember.
Purgatory,
I'll think of it in a couple of seconds.
Limbo.
No, it's when you cease to exist, when you're a non-believer. Instead of going to hell forever, it's just your soul is snuffed out. But
Annihilationist.
Annihilationist. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, I don't want either of those fates. And so very selfishly, I could say, you know what? I want to believe, but I don't know, Elmo, that I would worship that God even if I knew that I was damned for hell for eternity. Because I don't think that God's a very good guy if his character is presented accurately in the Bible. I don't. That's a big problem for me. Because I don't know where you stand theologically, but Calvinists, they think that everything is done for the glory of God. Everything, right? All of our existence just for the glory of God. Well, that seems a little bit weird, because I don't. I can bring it back to my kids. I have 2 kids. I didn't bring them into this world for my glory. I like them for themselves, and it just does not seem like a good guy if the character is accurately represented in the Bible. And if it's not, then different story maybe. But I also have a problem, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling again.
It's okay, man.
I also have a problem with the idea of worship in general.
Interesting.
I don't think that's cool. I don't know that worship is a positive thing at any point in time. And that's a position I've come to much later in life.
So before we move on, but I want to just cover the religion and wrap it up here. So in terms of there are billions of people with different religions, of course, believing genuinely, right? And of course, I do agree that you can believe something genuinely and still be genuinely wrong.
Right.
And you do have your own reasons here, like we have our different reasons for believing and not believing. But if you were to, to have the opportunity to tell someone like, hey, what you're believing is possibly wrong. And there are a lot of reasons for you to, if you just open up and, open your eyes, what would you say to someone to convince them to, think clearly and see things for what it is?
Well, first I would evaluate whether doing so for that person would be a net benefit or not. I mean, that's, if you want my honest answer, that's what it would be. I'm obviously not going to go up to my ailing grandfather and say, guess what? This whole Jesus thing you believed in all your life, it's bullshit, brother. And let me tell you why. I'm not going to do that. There's no real benefit there for him. He's comfortable. He's going to die believing, maybe, who knows really, but believing in something. And I don't see that harm, right? I think there's more harm in telling him. However, if I felt like, there was, it's so situation specific, but where I always go is, what's your goal? What's really your goal? Because if you really want to know what's real, how the world actually is, then you need to take another drive by your religious faith. Now, if that's not your goal, if you don't really care and you just are comfortable and you want to go to church and be around those people, then I can't really help you. I'm just going to be your friend and that's it. So it really has to do with the person's goal, epistemological goal in their life. And I think that's, I think most of us want to believe that we have the goal of knowing how the world really is and knowing truth. But I don't find that most people do. I think most people just want to be comfortable. So that's where I would start. What's your goal? And then, taking it from there. I'm not really sure. I would probably look at the historical context of all religions. It's pretty easy to look at Judaism and its evolution from early Canaanite Babylonian religions and how that developed, and the historical context for the beginnings of Christianity. I would say historical context is probably the biggest thing that opened my eyes to the fact that, boy, religion just does not have any real claims about reality.
And for the first part of the show, we focused on what you don't believe and why you don't believe it. But I want to ask you then, so existentialism, or what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What you're gonna do about it? And of course, ethics, how are you gonna behave then? From because you will do.
University of Maryland Global Campus has more than 20 years' experience providing affordable online education to military service members and working adults, offering low tuition, no-cost digital resources replacing most textbooks, scholarships for those who qualify, and more. Learn more at umgc.edu/podcast.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.
Exists, you do find some meaning in your life, and
so are you familiar? I mean, how familiar are you with Nietzsche and Camus?
Very familiar. I have all their books.
Okay, perfect. So I would describe myself as through nihilist path to absurdist in that way, sort of. Are you familiar with Bill Murray in The Fourth Way? In that right? Okay. No, that's fine. It's obscure. That would be what I would describe myself as, where life is. We just got to deal with it. We got to work out the best that we can. And maybe we can't figure everything out, but we can definitely have a good time, and we can make the world better for other people and the people that we leave behind. That's pretty well it. I am no stranger to existential dread. Anymore I am. I think that's just a part of life. I think part of it is just growing up. I think part of it is the late stage of capitalism we exist in. I think part of it is, for some people, real medical and mental issues that society does a really poor job of addressing. I mean, that's my core philosophical feeling, is that the world is the place that it is. We got to approach it like it is and make the best of it for ourselves. And we got to decide for ourselves what the best of it is. And that kind of ties into my ethical framework.
Mm-hmm. But before we move into that, why do we need or have to make the best out of it? Cameron,
we don't.
Right, being an absurdist, right? He the question of suicide. Right.
Yes. Should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee?
So
No.
Why not?
The answer is we don't. The answer is you get to answer that question every single day for yourself. And that, I think, is, we can come to see that that's beautiful. The choice there to go on existing, that we get to make, fantastic. I love the fact that it's been a great comfort to me over the years, even though it sounds kind of sober and macabre. But I love the fact that I can just off myself and not have to deal with it anymore. Now, I don't want to. I make the choice not to, but I get to make that choice. And I think that's a fantastic and wonderful and beautiful thing. So the answer to why is, you have to make up your own mind on that one, because I think there's some biological reasons why we want to continue living. I think that's kind of ingrained into us biologically, and we have to be aware of that. I hope that answers your question.
In terms of the actions, right? Why do we prefer this direction rather than this one? If it was all just purely biological, or just us chasing a dopamine rush and call it happiness, right? It could be something else, and so anyone. It would be completely subjective. But do you have a problem with that, or do you think it's not going to actually subjective?
Well, I don't know that I care, because when you say actual happiness, what does that mean compared to a dopamine hit? I mean, I don't know that there's a huge difference, but here's sort of my take, because I think we're talking a little bit about determinism and free will, and the nature versus soul argument there a little bit. My thought there is, of course we have free will, because if of course we have free will, because we absolutely couldn't exist without it. That's not what I'm trying to say. Cut that part out. But my thought here is on free will. It's oh man, I completely lost track. Oh no, I was going to say, the more that we understand about our lack of free will and how our physical reality determines how we act and how we are, the more free will we gain. If that makes sense. The more we're able to learn about how we're impacted by our external reality, the more we're able to change those external factors.
So we
and
have,
but I don't really care. Because the end effect is the same, right? I think we can maximize our perception of free will. I think free will is kind of a ghost that we're chasing here. I think the important thing is that it feels like we're acting of our own volition. But I think we can maximize that sense of free will by understanding the external impacts that reality has upon us and changing those external factors. If I know that I'm more grouchy when I have not eaten a sufficient meal, I can change that factor when I am going to be, doing a work meeting or talking to a client or something like that. That sort of knowledge of that external factor, being able to exercise control over that, means that you are maximizing your own free will.
So when you say we are maximizing our own free will, then you do agree that in our life we are actual agents able to transcend our deterministic nature.
I mean, I'd like to think so, but here's the thing. I mean, can I show you hard evidence of that? No. So, I mean, if you want my honest answer is like, I don't really know. To be honest. I mean, yeah, I'd like to think so, but I don't really know. What I do know is that I can change my external factors. And to me, that kind of feels like I have more control and more free will.
Or you're saying that it seems to you that you can change external factors.
Yeah. And that's good enough for me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So you're just comfortable with that as well. Same as people who have religion and everything.
Well, I think that's a fair criticism, that I'm comfortable with that. I think, though, at the very core of things, I can't answer that question, right? There's no ability for me to kind of peek past that veil, at least not yet. And the opposite of that, if there is no free will, I'm fine with that too. I've got to be fine with both. So I'm not making a positive claim there. I'm telling you,
you just you just can't break the fourth wall. Right.
Can't break that wall, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I think that I think we have to be fine with that to a certain extent. But I mean, it is a fair criticism. But here's the other thing too. we could talk about the foundations of logic, the laws of logic, non-contradiction and whatnot. Those are things that we all presuppose as well, right? We have to. So I think having free will or having the feeling of free will is something that we can't know how we're able to think and that sort of thing. Maybe it's sort of the same way. So I think we all make some presuppositions. The thing is, I want to minimize those as much as possible. You know what I mean? And when I don't know, like in the case of free will, I want to admit that.
So I'm really glad that you were talking about free will here, because in order for us to talk about your ethics and the ethical framework that you live your life by, I think it is essential for us to understand if you do believe that we should hold people accountable as active agents with free will, or just like robots, like being determined to do crime eventually, inevitably in their lives, and so we're just restraining them.
Let me ask you this: do you agree that people in lower income households are more likely to commit crime, and that's a good predictor of crime?
Well, in terms of the possible variables that could affect them, I would say yes.
So, so do you think that if we made sure that less people grew up in lower income houses, that crime would reduce? Like if we made that systemic change and impacted, how many people are in low income houses? There's a fewer amount, there's a lower amount now. Mm-hmm. Do you think that would impact our crime rates?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're asking me that, I would say like there are a lot of independent variables there, but if we do sort of change that specific element, that like lessen or reduce the number of people in low income houses, then yes, it would be a good predictor to say that it would lessen crime.
So I sort of take that approach with when it comes to free will and morality, is that there are huge amounts of factors that impact people's behavior. We've got to know that, we've got to understand that, we can't shy away from that fact. Mm-hmm. Now at the same time, societally, we have to treat people as independent actors. We just, pragmatically, that's something we have to do. We have to hold people accountable for their actions. Pragmatically, exactly. So at a very practical standpoint, if we do not hold people responsible for their actions to some degree, then the whole thing falls apart. Now, when I say to some degree, what I mean is that, I'm not talking about retributive justice. I'm not talking about punitive justice. I'm talking about rehabilitation justice, that sort of thing, if that makes sense. But I mean, from a practical standpoint, yes, we have to act as if we have free will, and these things are a factor for now. Now, maybe that changes. Maybe in 200 years, we're able to pinpoint some things a lot better, and we're able to know more. But we are limited by what we know, and we have to act with the ignorance that we're gifted.
You mentioned 2 points there that I want to break down, and I want you to break down. Well, first is you mentioned pragmatism. Okay, so when when we work in a pragmatic model, right? And so there's a certain metric there, this is pragmatically good, so and pragmatically bad, right? If practically, right?
Sure.
So what would be your basis for what is pragmatic? Because you're the one it's pragmatic from your perspective, but if other people, if a Muslim or a Buddhist or an agnostic uses pragmatism, it could be hell of a lot different from you, right? From your perspective as well.
I don't think so, because I think that pragmatically, we all agree on some really basic shit. I think that the idea that there's huge disparities between different philosophies and different belief systems and morality, sure, there's some, but boy, we sure live together pretty well for those disparities to happen.
Yeah, so far.
I don't know. Well, and I think the trend is good. Yeah, so I don't know that I buy that premise, if that makes sense. Like, I think that we all agree that, human well-being is good, and that's what we want more of. I think it's really obvious that peace is a positive thing, and that we want more of it. Now, we're not there yet, and I don't know that we'll ever be there in that sense. But I really don't agree with that premise, man, because the way you say it makes it sound like, oh my God, these people are at each other's throats. No, bro, for the most part.
If you look at history though, right? Like in terms of well-being, we a lot of we did have the idea of this is well-being, like healthy, having needs met and then wants, sufficiently served. But if you look back at, let's say, like Holocaust, Yeah, like the Nazis had this idea of a well-being for their society, right? But in order for us to judge them, we had to come from our perspective. In morals perspective was different from theirs, and so there is this disparity. But if you actually just judge that, like, pragmatically, they had their pragmatic reasons for it, and we have our
Hmm.
pragmatic reason for it. So who are we to judge
No, no.
them?
So, yeah, and when I say pragmatic, I just mean having to operate with the tools and the abilities that we have. So, I'm using it in a very colloquial sense. I'm a utilitarian at the end of the day. And so, but here's the thing. When it comes to morality, when it comes to moral systems, I think we have to be really honest with ourselves, and we have to have a goal in mind. We have to look at meta ethics, because, and I this is really what frustrates me about apologists sometimes, because I'm happy to have the conversation at just a non-meta level about morality, and what the ontology of morality is, and what are normative ethics. But really, if we break this down and we say, look, what's our goal? What is our goal? It's very similar to looking back at the epistemological goal of figuring stuff out or being comfortable. I think if our goal is to live together and do the best that we can together, then our path forward instantly becomes clear. These moral questions get resolved pretty quickly. That sort of meta ethic system allows us to address new moral problems. Moral problems,
yeah.
like cloning, for example.
It seems to me, though, what you're saying is like, oh, hey, we exist in this vacuum, but let's just ignore all the possible actual claim, like moral truths there, but we do have the shared goal. So let's just work on that and find and use the tools that we have in order to achieve that goal. And just
now, the criticism that we work in a vacuum is very good. That is a great criticism, because we obviously don't. Everybody has their own moral history, moral background, and that's something that I absolutely agree with you there on. That's something that cannot be glossed over, if you will. I think that when we take a look at morality and policy, if we look at what policy should be, we absolutely need to take into consideration the background of everybody that's involved. I think that's important. So no, that's a fair criticism.
Yeah, and this is why we needed to, before we dive into politics, we need to look at the foundations of your foundations of not just the existence, like meaning, and like how you approach existence, and free will, of course, your stance on that. And so in terms, I wouldn't say that your answers are pretty vague, but I would say your answers are pretty honest. Like you hold integrity. You hold yourself accountable for what you can claim and what you can't, you claim. Because if you're really not sure about something, then you can't like assert it as truth. You recognize that your knowledge on something is limited, but you have to work with what you have, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and I apologize if I come across as vague. I really don't mean to, but I mean the topic is huge, right? The topic of morality is giant. So it almost warrants some vagaries there, because unless we want to get very specific, tough to talk about morality, unless we want to talk about it from a meta ethical standpoint, or criticize certain methods of morality. Here's what I mean here. Here's where I come. We can work out how to live together without any extra baggage. We have this religious baggage. That's something that needs to be sorted out, especially when we're talking about a multicultural blended society, right? That's great, but we don't need to reference anything other than how we can best work together. As long as that's our goal, that's what it is. That bypasses the 1930s Germany example, right? That's not working together. So, and really, that comes down, in my mind, to a choice. Do we want to live together and work together, or do we not? And if we do, that's great. We can figure out ways to do that. If we don't, well, those people need to be ostracized from society. They need to be cut off. People that don't want to do that need to know that that's not acceptable, and either to change their goals, which is what we do right now with our justice system. So that's where I come from. Again, a very vague.
But don't you think though that it is actually that it gives space to some sort of tyrannical government, right? Of collective, telling a minority, hey, your moral system, doesn't agree with ours, so we're the majority, so we're gonna ostracize you and put you in prison.
So you're talking about what you're addressing really, really head on is Popper's paradox of tolerance. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. I'm with Popper on this. You cannot be tolerant of intolerance. You have to be intolerant towards intolerance. And I know, it seems paradoxical, but we have to have a society. I mean, we have to. I mean, it's if we want to survive, and that's a choice we have to make. And I think, let me back up a little bit, because I think there's a little bit of uncomfortableness with the idea that we get to choose what our moral goals are. I think there's a bit of queasiness that comes with that thought that a lot of people feel. Because what I see some people that are religious want to do is they want to know what should be done, right? They want that to be out there and clear and told from the top down. This is what should be done. I'm proposing that we have to make that choice ourselves. And that's what we do currently. And so, but as far as the paradox of tolerance, I mean, I don't think that's a problem. No, you can't be a part of our society if you're going to be a Nazi. Fuck you, and so, I think that's an issue that has been solved. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, but then let's talk about the political side here, because it does involve these philosophical elements. So being an anarcho-communist, what does that mean?
So oh boy, that's a broad question. So the anarcho side of that is no unjust hierarchies, right? So, and we've moved away from this as a society for a long time now. We've moved away from the divine right of kings. It's pointing to a very historical view of, nobody's really a better person than anybody else as far as from an authoritative standpoint. There's just not. Merit-based ruling is largely BS, so that's the anarcho side. It's more of a free society, a more of an egalitarian society, equitable society. And so that can manifest itself in various different ways. For example, in my house, we are, very honest with our children. And when they ask why, we tell them. We don't say, because I say so. We give them reasons, and that can be exhausting. But it's important because they are people just like me, and I need to treat them like people and like humans. So it's a level for me. On a wider, more political level, what that means is decentralization, which is a big ass term, meaning more local control is all that means. And it means, not putting anybody in authority in a position of authority for no good goddamn reason. Is really what that means. No unjust hierarchies. From the communist side, so big fan of Marx, big old Marx boy over here. I think that private property. I think private property is theft. I mean, I think that we need to we need to move to a worker-based economy. I love worker co-ops. I'm a big Richard Wolff fan. I mean, unless you want me to get more specific in some ways there. Now, I'm not a tanky. I'm not a and that's really the reason for the anarcho prefix there. I'm not an authoritarian. I don't think that we should be, riding the tanks down mid-square and instituting a dictatorship of the proletariat. So yeah, that's the reason for that prefix. But
I do understand where you're coming from here, and you do have this ideal, idea of governance. But my question would be on the foundations of why you prefer an anarcho-communist state, with these ideals. So, for example, when it comes to I want to move forward with the communist part, with economics, right?
Sure.
So private property, and then you said it's theft, so you have to have some actions there in order to say that this theft is actually wrong, and private, and not having private property is right. Why? How can you say this? Like, what standard or what is your basis for this?
I get what you're saying. Sure. So when I'm talking about private property, what am I talking about? First of all, I'm talking about, large corporations owning the means of production, right? Whatever that is, whether that's a farm, what doesn't matter, right? So when I say that's theft, I mean that there is not an equitable distribution of labor to profits for the people that are working in those jobs, nor is there an equitable equitable distribution of those goods that are produced. There is a direct funneling upwards of wealth. I mean, this is undeniable. We can't deny this, right? We know that there are people in this country that are trillionaires now, from the exploitation of workers. And so, to say that this is theft, I think is putting it lightly. Now, so the basis there that I have for saying that, right? What is the moral basis for saying that? I choose to value every human equally. That's my moral basis. And this system that we're in does not value every human.
Okay, so why should we value every human though?
Because we choose to.
Because you choose to. So in this sense, like in your moral framework, right? It is shaped by whatever you choose it to be.
I mean, you can make some really persuasive arguments, right? You can make the argument that we live together better, and hopefully that's our goal. We live together better when we're all working together, when we're all equal, when we have the same amount of opportunity and a good amount of the same outcome. You can make that argument and try to persuade people. At the end of the day, it comes down to what people choose. And so, when we're talking about, because, we have to get into policy. Policy in that is much, much harder than me just saying this is, I'm going to be real honest with you. This is what I choose, right? I can't tell you how to make everybody else choose this, but I can definitely give some arguments. You know what I mean? And try to persuade them.
But at the end of the day, you're gonna have to say, well, I believe the human lives should be treated equally because you choose to do so. At the end of the day, right? You can give some explanation and utilitarian reasoning, but so you choose.
Yeah.
So in this sense, though,
because hold on, let me put it to you though. Like, hopefully, right, you and I would agree that humans are worth something, right? Like we both would wake up and say, yep, other humans are worth something.
Well,
right?
Someone could disagree with us, and they could.
No, it doesn't matter. I'm talking about you. No, they could, but I was talking about you. Like, we agree on that, and we come from very disparate backgrounds, and not, maybe similar backgrounds, but very different places right now in what we believe. So, I think that we both have the same real core belief, right? Humans are worth something. And I think that a lot of progress can be made by just focusing on those things that we agree with instead of on the things that we disagree.
Yeah, well, we can focus on what we agree, but the thing is, there are people out there who are trillionaires who disagree with us, right, and have their own moral system. And you know, if you choose your moral system, why can't they? And then
Oh,
eventually,
they can. They can. That is the tragedy of it, Elmo. They can and they do all day long. I mean, they wake up every day with their net worth being what it is, and they make the active choice. I believe it is an active choice to not do more than they are as far as affecting good in the world. That's true. I mean, it's obviously blatantly true. They make that choice. And what you're asking for is some sort of outside source to say, that's wrong. And what I'm telling you is, regardless of whether that exists, we are here and we need to choose for ourselves and say, you know what, that's wrong because we care. We've made the choice to care about these things.
Yeah, okay. So in the end, right, it's might is right. Right? Yeah, like
no, it's the opposite of that. No, it's not might is right.
Well, it's because like you know, if their you know their chosen moral framework is valid, same as everyone else's, but how are we going to solve this and you know equalize and distribute wealth? Well, we will have to overpower them in order to enforce what we believe is right.
You mean effectively? Yeah. Effectively, might is making right in how the world operates, and I would agree. Absolutely. Effectively, that's how that works, and that's a hard pill to swallow. But yes, I mean, obviously, right? the one with the power moves the wheels, and so we need to take that power back.
All right. So, okay, and I actually do agree with that. In order to enforce real good change, we have to make certain decisions. You know, that.
And I think I'd appeal to you. I think that, you know, based on what I know of you, I think that 90% of things we would agree on from a policy standpoint.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that we would. And you know what? I'm willing to work with you and anybody else with 90% of that. I mean, I know a lot of Christians who are in the anarchic and socialist camp, and they align like 90%. And you know what? I don't want to take their religion away. If their religion helps them, if that's great for them and it makes them feel like they want to, you know, great. You know what? That's fantastic.
All right. Well, I guess we sort of went over most of what you believe, but there are a lot of topics there, man. We've been the show has been awesome so far. But one last question, Ty. You know, to wrap it all up, like, so we've unpacked your worldview, philosophical, religious worldview, right, and including the ethical framework that you abide in, and the political stance that you hold. So, so I want to ask you, like, you mentioned on the show that at the end of the day we need to agree on this goal and decide like how are we gonna achieve this, you know, this goal though is very far away, right? And there's so much to do. But you, Ty, like you being who you are and having these beliefs, what effective plan or action are you going to take in order to, to maybe not just influence others, but just for yourself? You know, what's the long goal?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like everybody else living in this capitalist hellscape, I'm surviving. Right. So I'm living my life as best as I can and trying to enact what change that I can. Part of that is working with my kids. I mean, part of that is raising kids that are critical thinkers, that are empathetic, and that are involved locally and in ways that can affect change later on. Part of that has been locally involved in my politics. But then, I mean, part of it too is I'm a member of the IWW, big fan. Anybody out there wants to go check them out, IWW, International Workers of the World. Great institution, one big union. And then, I mean, that's my plan there, man, is to do as much as I can. And I'm pretty much a nobody, but Yeah.
All right, awesome, Ty. And is there anything else you want to promote, like a blog or YouTube channel?
Yeah, so the only thing I'd promote is my TikTok. My handle is PhD in ADHD. So follow me there. It's mostly stupid. And then the only last thing I'd say is trans right, brother. Trans right.
All right, then. Well, Ty, it's been awesome having you in the show. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day, man.
You too. You take care.
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
When we talk about McDonald's combo meals, we talk about savory meat, golden fries, and your favorite drink. Now, the combo meals just got crispy, juicy, and tender with the new Crispy Chicken Sandwich Combo. And you have to try it.
Get a classic or spicy crispy chicken sandwich with medium fries and a medium soft drink like Sprite for only $6. Promotion pricing may be lower than meal pricing. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.